You may be wondering why you should care about what's happened to Colorado's schools, universities, healthcare, roads, and economy. After all, you don't live there. But Colorado is a case study of the harmful effects of TABOR, the so-called taxpayer Bill of Rights. And with some politicians trying to bring it to your state, you should know what it's actually done to Colorado taxpayers in their state.
Coloradans were told in 1992 when TABOR passed that what this guaranteed them was a right to vote on any and all tax increases. What the public didn't realize is that it would contain the strictest tax and spending limitation of any state in the country, and long-term would hobble us economically.
TABOR's fine print reveals a rigid formula of inflation plus population growth that determines how much the state government can increase its spending from one year to the next. And here's why this formula doesn't work. Inflation is determined using the Consumer Price Index, which is based on what a typical American buys. Think of it as a basket of goods that includes things like housing, cars, and food. But here's the problem. What consumers buy day to day is not the same as the basket of goods state government buys day to day. States must purchase things like education and health care, services that rise in price much faster than what the average person buys. So restricting a state's budget based on the increase of the Consumer Price Index prevents states from keeping up with the rising cost of vital services, making drastic cuts inevitable.
As a Republican, I can tell you that TABOR will tie your hands.
Brad Young served in the Colorado State Legislature for over a decade and was chairman of the state's Budget Committee. He's seen firsthand the devastating effects of TABOR, and he's now writing a book, The Truth About TABOR.
The formula of growth plus inflation doesn't keep up with the economy. What it does is it has an insidious effect where it shrinks government every year, year after year after year after year after year. It's never small enough.
The faulty formula is only one major problem with TABOR. Another major problem is that because it gets locked into a state's constitution, it is very rigid, leaving no flexibility for a state to respond to unexpected challenges. In fact, since TABOR was added to the state constitution, Colorado has become one of the nation's poorest funded and poorest performing states. Colorado has fallen to 47th in K-12 education funding. The ratio of teacher salaries to average private sector earnings is the lowest in the nation. Child immunization rates are one of the lowest in the nation, and pension and reserve funds have been raided just to keep basic public services functioning. And then there are the promised taxpayer refunds that in years when Coloradans actually get them aren't really worth much.
One year we got $132 back, but when I'm having to pay $1,000 for my kids to do sports because of what isn't available any longer, it's not worth it.
Christy Hargrove is a Republican and a small business owner.
TABOR has made it impossible to keep up with the cost of education. Our schools are suffering terribly.
It's pretty, isn't it? Mm-hmm.
Her family lives in a small town some 500 miles from Denver. Her 3 kids attend the local high school where TABOR has literally had a chilling effect.
The kids were freezing in school. It was ridiculous, wearing down coats to school. And, in some of the schools they're wearing gloves, taking notes wearing gloves. And actually that's what got me involved.
Christy says they've had to rely on the PTA, private donations, and a mill levy to keep their schools running, not to mention the heat.
We have local fundraisers and property tax initiatives and things to pay locally for what the state used to pay for because there's no money. Our PTA here is buying all the textbooks for the school.
Jay Helman is the president of Colorado's Western State College. He's seen firsthand how TABOR has placed public higher education lower and lower on the priority list for funding.
We've got a real backlog of controlled and deferred maintenance issues with our buildings. At our college, a small college, we're about 13 million behind in our ability to care for our facilities.
Most important thing that governments can do to aid an economy are to invest in people, education and workforce, and infrastructure.
Tom Clark is the executive director of the Denver Metro Chamber, the largest business organization in the state.
The biggest and most obvious infrastructure that suffered have been roads and higher education. We're running, depending upon who you talk to, a $40 to $60 billion deficit in road work that needs to be found somewhere, and Tabor's made it impossible for us to get that money back into projects.
I think it definitely has an impact on safety in the community. $300,000 was actually paid by the community.
Art Morales is the fire chief for Castle Rock, Colorado, population 35,000. He's had to freeze jobs at his fire station due to Tabor budget restrictions, putting his existing firefighters' safety at risk, as well as the safety of the growing community.
We're providing more and more services just without extra people.
There's really not an end in sight, leaving Tabor intact.
Rancher John Singletary says the water regulatory agency in Colorado has gotten so broke that they've turned into a primarily fee-funded agency.
When they come and inspect our wells or do any services that regulate our water process here, they charge enormous fees, maybe up 300–400% over what they were prior to this Tabor.
And Singletary says Tabor's created a funding drought for Colorado's Ag Department.
The Colorado Department of Agriculture has no money to help the farmer in research and in infested areas. We have different diseases that sometimes hit our livestock that we need help, assistance on, and boy, it's really difficult. It's difficult to find that money.
Has she ever had pneumonia before?
She's had 1 ear infection.
We had no idea what the true impact of Tabor would be when it was passed.
She stayed 20 days.
Dr. Stephen Berman is the professor of pediatrics at the University of Colorado School of Medicine.
Colorado has the most restrictive child health programs in the country.
Tabor has forced the state of Colorado to opt out of certain Medicaid programs, and the result is devastating to families like Kim Aboods, who has health care insurance but needs Medicaid because her daughter is severely disabled.
I have been given basically 3 options, and those options were to institutionalize my daughter, or to move to another state that we wouldn't have a waiting list, or to come up with the money, the funds on our own to pay for her supplies. It's devastating for my daughter because her health is at stake.
Since Tabor, 3/4 of Colorado pediatricians won't treat Medicaid patients because reimbursement rates are so low. More poor children lack health insurance in Colorado than in any other state in the nation, and access to prenatal care has fallen dramatically. And on November 1st, 2005, after 12 years of Tabor, Colorado voters said enough. They approved a measure to put Tabor on hold for the next 5 years to avoid further deterioration of state services. So learn from the experiences of Coloradans. If someone is trying to convince you to vote to put Tabor into your state's constitution, think about it. Think about what this rigid, unrealistic formula of inflation plus population growth could do to your state. And ask yourself, is it worth it?
It hits you everywhere, and it is a problem, and it's very apparent every day. It's not just something that's out there. It's in your life. It's in your face.
My recommendation to other states is learn from the Colorado experience. Don't go down the road we traveled.